My husband Rudy handed me foreclosure papers at First National Bank and walked away with his mistress, leaving me humiliated in front of everyone. I never went home. When they realized I'd vanished, I was already building a real estate empire in Dubai. 5 years later, I walked back into that same bank as the new owner of their mortgage portfolio, and Rudy's face went white when the manager introduced me as their new boss. The fluorescent lights of First National Bank buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I stood frozen in the marble lobby, clutching papers that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Foreclosure Notice, Final Demand, Immediate Eviction Required. The words blurred together through the tears I refused to let fall. Not here, not in front of all these strangers who were pretending not to stare. Naomi, you need to understand the reality of your situation. Rudy's voice carried that condescending tone I'd grown to hate over our 8 years of marriage. He stood 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne, the one I'd bought him for his last birthday. But he might as well have been on another planet. The house was always in my name. The accounts, the investments, everything. You have no legal claim to any of it. Behind him, Crystal Morrison stood with her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. Crystal, who had been my friend since college. Crystal, who had sat at our dinner table countless times, laughing at my jokes and complimenting my cooking, while secretly planning to steal my husband. Her ruby red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her cold blue eyes. This is really for the best, Naomi, Crystal said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Rudy deserves someone who can match his ambition, someone who understands the business world. She squeezed his arm tighter. Someone younger. The bank manager, a nervous man in his 50s with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses, shuffled his papers uncomfortably. Mrs. Chen, I'm truly sorry about this situation, but the foreclosure proceedings are quite clear. Mr. Chen has provided all the necessary documentation proving sole ownership of the property. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. 72 hours. 3 days to pack up 8 years of marriage, to figure out where to go, how to survive. I had been a stay-at-home wife by Rudy's insistence, managing our household while he built his construction company. A man's wife should focus on making a beautiful home, he'd always said. Let me handle the money. Now I understood why he'd been so insistent, why every account was in his name alone, why he'd discouraged me from working, from having any financial independence. This moment, this public humiliation in a bank lobby, had been his plan all along. The prenup is very clear, Rudy continued, pulling out another set of documents. His dark eyes, once warm when they looked at me, now held nothing but cold calculation. In the event of divorce, you're entitled to nothing. You signed it yourself, remember? Right before our wedding. I remembered. 23 years old, so deeply in love, so trusting. It's just a formality, he'd said then. My father's lawyer insists on it for all family marriages. It doesn't mean anything. We'll never need it. I'd signed without even reading it properly, too excited about becoming Mrs. Chen to worry about legal details. But Rudy, I whispered, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay strong. What about everything we built together? What about what? His laugh was harsh, echoing off the polished marble walls. You never contributed anything, Naomi. I paid for everything. The house, the cars, your clothes, your food. You were basically a very expensive pet. Several customers in the bank had stopped their business to watch our drama unfold. An elderly woman with a cane shook her head sympathetically. A young mother holding a toddler looked away, embarrassed by the intimacy of our public destruction. The security guard near the door shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether this was a situation requiring his intervention. Crystal's smile widened. We've actually been together for 3 years now, she said, her voice bright and cheerful, as if she were discussing the weather. "Rudy's been so unhappy for so long. We tried to spare your feelings, but honestly, this charade has gone on far enough. 3 years. 3 years of lies while I'd prepared his meals, organized his social events, supported his business ventures. 3 years of Crystal coming to our house for dinner parties, helping me cook, listening to me confide my dreams of having children, of growing old with Rudy, all while she was warming his bed and planning my destruction. I've already moved my things into the house," Crystal continued. "My decorator is coming next week to make some changes. That wallpaper in the master bedroom has got to go. So outdated." She wrinkled her nose. "The whole place needs a woman's touch. A sophisticated woman's touch." The bank manager cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could discuss this more privately. We have conference rooms available." "No need," Rudy interrupted. "Naomi understands the situation perfectly. Don't you, sweetheart?" The endearment sounded like poison on his lips. "You're a smart girl. You'll figure something out." I looked around the bank lobby, at the marble columns and brass fixtures, at the security cameras recording every moment of my humiliation. Somewhere in my mind, a voice I hadn't heard in years, my grandmother's voice, whispered the words she'd repeated throughout my childhood. "When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time." "I need to use the restroom," I said quietly, clutching the foreclosure papers to my chest. Rudy waved his hand dismissively. "Take all the time you need. We have dinner reservations at 8. He pulled Crystal closer, kissing her temple in a deliberate display of affection. Celebrating our new beginning. I walked toward the back of the bank on unsteady legs, past the loan officer's desks and the safe deposit boxes, past the customer service counter where a young woman watched me with obvious pity. In the bathroom mirror, I stared at my reflection. 31. Years old, with long black hair that Rudy had always insisted I wear loose because he liked it that way. Wearing the conservative beige dress he'd bought me because earth tones suit you better than bright colors. For 8 years, I'd been exactly what he'd wanted. Quiet, obedient, grateful, invisible. But as I stared at my reflection, something fundamental shifted inside me. The woman looking back at me had intelligent dark eyes that had been dimmed but not extinguished. She had a business degree from Northwestern that she'd never been allowed to use. She had dreams that had been buried but not killed, and she was done being anyone's victim. I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Pearl, who lived in Los Angeles and had never liked Rudy. The sister I'd grown distant from because he'd gradually isolated me from everyone who might have given me strength. "Naomi?" Pearl's voice was surprised. "Are you okay? You sound—" "I need help," I whispered into the phone. "I need to disappear." 3 hours after leaving the bank, I sat in my car outside our house. Former house, watching through the living room windows as Rudy and Crystal celebrated with champagne. They'd moved fast. Too fast. Something about their casual cruelty, their perfectly timed arrival at the bank felt orchestrated. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I accessed our joint email account. What I found there destroyed what remained of my naive belief that this betrayal was recent. The email thread stretched back 4 years, not 3, as Crystal had claimed. 4 years of detailed planning, of discussing my removal from their lives like I was an inconvenient business obstacle. I scrolled through message after message, each one a knife to whatever remained of my heart. From crystal.realtoragmail.com, rudichin.constructionagmail.com. Date, March 15, 2019, subject, the plan. Baby, I found the perfect foreclosure lawyer. Henderson and Associates specialize in spousal asset protection. They can structure everything so she gets nothing. My real estate license gives me access to property records. I can make sure any assets are properly hidden before you file. From rudican.construction@gmail.com to christum.realtor@gmail.com. Date, March 16th, 2019. Subject, the plan. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Brilliant. I knew dating a realtor would pay off. What about the house? From christum.realtor@gmail.com. rudican.construction@gmail.com. Date, March 16th, 2019. Subject, the plan, already handled. I'll buy it through my LLC, then sell it back to you for $1. She'll never trace it. Your construction company. Profits are being funneled through 3 shell companies I set up. On paper, you'll look practically bankrupt when the divorce happens. My hands shook as I continued reading. Every detail of my destruction had been planned with business-like precision. They'd discussed my daily routines, my lack of career prospects, my isolation from friends and family. Crystal had even researched which banks would be most willing to expedite foreclosure proceedings. But the worst email came from November of last year, from rudican.construction@gmail.com, christum.realtor@gmail.com. Date, November 26, 2022. Subject, Thanksgiving thoughts. Watching her cook Thanksgiving dinner for my family, being all grateful and sweet. I almost feel bad. She has no idea what's coming. Sometimes she looks at me like she's still that starry-eyed kid who thought we'd grow old together. From christum.realtor@gmail.com, rudican.construction@gmail.com. Date, November 22nd, 2022. Subject, Thanksgiving thoughts. Don't go soft on me now. She's had 8 years of living off your success without contributing anything real. Think of this as a performance review. She failed. Besides, I've already put deposits down on the Caribbean cruise for Christmas and the renovation contractors for January. No turning back now. P.S. Her sister Pearl called her 3 times today. Naomi didn't answer because she was too busy playing housewife. Perfect example of why she deserves this. I stopped breathing. Pearl had called me 3 times? I'd never received those calls. I checked my phone settings and found what I was looking for. Call forwarding. Rudy had somehow activated call forwarding on my phone, redirecting calls from my family to a number I didn't recognize. How long had I been cut off from my own sister without knowing it? My fingers flew over the phone screen, checking my social media accounts. Every single one had been deactivated. My LinkedIn, my Facebook, my Instagram, all gone. When had this happened? How had I not noticed? But I knew how. Rudy had been so subtle, so gradual in his isolation techniques. Social media is such a waste of time, babe. You're too smart for that stuff. Your sister always fills your head with career nonsense. Why don't you turn off your phone during family time? That college friend of yours is so negative. Maybe take a break from those calls? I thought he wanted to protect our relationship. In reality, he'd been systematically severing every connection that might have given me strength or support when this moment arrived. I found more evidence in his calendar app, which I'd always had access to as the family organizer. Dinner dates. With Crystal going back 3 years, listed as client meetings. Weekend trips marked as construction site visits that I now realized were romantic getaways. Even our anniversary dinner last month, he'd left halfway through, claiming an emergency at the office. The calendar showed the truth. C's birthday celebration. He'd left our anniversary dinner to celebrate Crystal's birthday. The most damning evidence was in his photo album. Pictures of them together in our bedroom, in our kitchen, on our vacation to Hawaii that he'd claimed was a business trip. Crystal wearing my jewelry, sleeping in my bed, cooking at my stove. In one photo, she was holding up my grandmother's china tea set, the one inheritance I'd managed to keep when my grandmother died, with a caption, "Can't wait to finally get rid of this old lady junk." My grandmother's tea set. The only thing I had left of her. The woman who'd raised me after my parents died. Crystal knew exactly what it meant to me because I'd told her the story dozens of times, showing her the delicate hand-painted flowers, explaining how my grandmother had saved for months to buy it as a young bride. But there was something else in these photos that made my blood run cold. They weren't just documenting their affair. They were cataloging our house, our possessions, our life. Crystal had taken photos of every room, every valuable item, every piece of furniture. She'd been conducting a thorough inventory, planning exactly what she wanted to keep and what she'd throw away, including me. I found a voice memo on his phone, accidentally recorded during one of their conversations. Crystal's voice. "The foreclosure notice should be delivered tomorrow. I've arranged for us to be at the bank at the same time. Make it look coincidental." Rudy's voice. "And if she breaks down, starts crying or making a scene?" Crystal's voice. "Let her. The more pathetic she looks, the better. I want everyone in that bank to see what a weak, dependent woman looks like. It'll make our relationship look even stronger by comparison." Rudy's voice. "Sometimes I think you're scarier than I am." Crystal's voice. "That's why we make such a good team. You handle the business side, I handle the emotional warfare." Emotional warfare. That's what they called the systematic destruction of my life. I sat in my car outside the house where I'd lived for 8 years, watching my husband and his mistress toast their victory through the window. But something had changed in those few hours since the bank. The crushing devastation was transforming into something else. A cold, calculating fury that felt nothing like the gentle, accommodating woman I'd been trained to be. They'd planned this destruction with business-like precision, thinking I was too broken, too isolated, too dependent to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I pulled up my banking app and checked our joint savings account. Empty, of course, but they'd made one crucial mistake. In all their careful planning, they'd forgotten about the account my grandmother had set up for me before she died. The one she'd insisted I keep secret for emergencies. The one I'd never told Rudy about because she'd made me promise to never trust anyone completely with my financial independence. "Men can be wonderful, darling," she'd whispered on her deathbed. "But a woman should always have her own escape route. $47,000. Enough to disappear. Enough to start over. Enough to become someone they'd never see coming." I drove to Pearl's apartment that night with nothing but the clothes on my back and the devastating knowledge of how thoroughly I'd been played. My sister opened the door in pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a single question. She made tea while I sat at her kitchen table, staring at the evidence on my phone screen, trying to process the magnitude of the deception. "How long have you known?" I asked when she finally sat down across from me, Pearl's dark eyes filled with pain. "Known what exactly?" "That I was disappearing, that my calls weren't going through, that something was wrong." She wrapped her hands around her mug, choosing her words carefully. "I've been trying to reach you for 6 months, Naomi. Your phone always went straight to voicemail, but not your regular voicemail, some generic automated message. When I called your house line, Rudy would answer and say you were sleeping or out with friends, but he'd forget to give you the messages." "What friends?" The bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "I don't have any friends anymore," he made sure of that. "I know." Pearl's voice was gentle but firm. "I drove to your house twice. Rudy met me at the door both times, said you weren't feeling well, that you'd call me later. You never did. I started to think—" She paused, struggling with the words. "I started to think maybe you'd chosen him over your family completely." The room felt like it was tilting. "What do you mean twice?" "Last Christmas, when Mom and Dad's anniversary was coming up. I wanted to visit their graves together like we always do. And then again in March, when I got the promotion at the marketing firm. I was so excited to tell you. I even brought champagne. I had no memory of Pearl coming to the house. None. which meant either I'd been drugged or, what time of day? Did you come? Both times around 2 in the afternoon, weekdays. I took time off work. My blood went cold. At 2 p.m. on weekdays, I was always at the gym. Rudy knew my schedule perfectly. He'd insisted on it. Routine is important for a marriage, he'd always said. I like knowing where my wife is. Now I understood why. He'd been intercepting my sister while I was conveniently out of the house. Pearl, I never knew you came. I've been waiting for you to call me back for months. I thought you were angry about something. My sister's face crumpled. I thought you'd become one of those women who disappears into her marriage. I was hurt, but I kept trying because... She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Because something felt wrong. Your Christmas card last year. Do you remember what you wrote? I shook my head. You wrote, Rudy, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Not we hope or I hope, Rudy and I. Like you were speaking for him instead of yourself. It didn't sound like you. She was right. It didn't sound like me because I hadn't written it. Rudy had dictated what to write in all our holiday cards, our thank you notes, our birthday wishes. Keep it simple, he'd always said. You tend to ramble when you write. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. I pulled out my phone and showed Pearl the emails I'd found. She read in silence, her expression growing darker with each message. Jesus Christ, Naomi, this isn't just an affair. This is a calculated destruction of your entire identity. I know. I scrolled to the photos Crystal had taken of our house. Look at these. She's been documenting everything like she's preparing for an estate sale. Pearl studied the images, her marketing background making her naturally analytical. These aren't random photos. Look at the angles, the composition. She's been creating a professional inventory. She paused on one image. Wait, is that your grandmother's tea set? She wants to throw it away, called it old lady junk. Over my dead body. Pearl's voice turned fierce. That tea set is the only thing we have left of Grandma Rose. She saved for 6 months to buy it when she was 19, working double shifts at the diner. I know. I told Crystal that story myself, thinking I was sharing family history with a friend. Pearl set down the phone and looked at me with laser focus. Naomi, I need you to think carefully. When did this isolation really start? Because this level of manipulation doesn't happen overnight. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember. The job thing started about 2 years into our marriage. I was working at Morrison & Associates. Wait. Pearl held up her hand. Morrison & Associates. Is that related to Crystal Morrison? The connection hit me like a physical blow. Her father owns Morrison & Associates. That's where I was working when Rudy convinced me to quit. He convinced you to quit working for your future mistress's father? The timeline crystallized with horrible clarity. I'd met Crystal through work. She was the boss's daughter who occasionally came to office events. She'd been friendly, asking about my marriage, my plans for children, my relationship with Rudy's family. I'd thought she was just making conversation. She was gathering intelligence, I whispered. From the very beginning. Learning my weaknesses, my insecurities, my dependencies. Pearl nodded grimly. And once she had enough information, Rudy started the campaign to get you to quit, remove you from the one place where you had professional identity and income. He said I was too stressed, that working was making me unhappy, that he wanted to take care of me properly. I remembered how romantic it had seemed at the time, a husband who wanted to cherish and protect his wife. I thought it was love. It was ownership. I pulled up more emails, finding a thread between Rudy and Crystal from 3 years ago titled Phase 2. From crystalm.realtorajmail.com to rudichin.construction@gmail.com. Date, April 3, 2021. Subject, Phase 2, Social Isolation. Now that she's not working, We need to separate her from her support network. I'll start canceling plans with her friends when you're busy and need her home. Make her feel guilty for having a social life while you're working so hard to support her. From rudikin.constructionagmail.com to kristalm.realtoragmail.com. Date, April 3, 2021. Subject, RE, Phase 2, Social Isolation. Already started. Told her that her college friends are immature and her work friends only liked her for office gossip. She's stopped reaching out to most of them. From kristalm.realtoragmail.com to rudikin.constructionagmail.com. Date, April 3, 2021. Subject, Phase 2, Social Isolation. Perfect. The sister is the biggest threat. We need to create conflict there or find a way to minimize contact. Maybe tell Naomi that Pearl thinks she's lazy for not working? Plant some seeds of insecurity? They orchestrated everything, I said, showing Pearl the screen. Every fight we had, every moment of self-doubt, every time I chose staying home over seeing friends, it was all planned. Pearl read the emails with growing fury. This is psychological abuse. This is. She paused, searching for the right word. This is criminal. They systematically destroyed your ability to function independently. And it worked. The admission felt like swallowing glass. I became exactly what they wanted, isolated, dependent, grateful for scraps of attention. But you're not that person anymore. Pearl leaned forward. The woman who figured out the call forwarding, who accessed those emails, who uncovered this entire conspiracy. That's not a victim. That's a detective. She was right. Something had fundamentally shifted in those hours since the bank. The fog of manipulation was lifting, revealing a mind that had been dormant but never destroyed. Pearl, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. Do you think I'm smart enough to fight back? Really fight back? Because they've spent 4 years convincing me I'm not capable of surviving without someone taking care of me. My sister looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Naomi, you have a business degree from Northwestern. You graduated summa cum laude. You were the one who taught me how to budget when I got my first apartment. You're the one who figured out mom and dad's insurance claims when they died. You've never been helpless. You've just been convinced that you were. She pulled out her laptop. Let me show you something. I've been tracking real estate markets for my marketing job, specifically targeting high-net-worth individuals who invest in international properties. The screen filled with charts and graphs showing property values, investment trends, and market predictions. There's a massive opportunity developing in Dubai's real estate market. New regulations are making it easier for foreign investors, and the market is about to explode. But it requires someone who understands both American investment law and international property management. I stared at the data, feeling neurons firing that hadn't been active in years. The profit margins are incredible. 20 to 30% returns in the first year alone, if you know what you're doing. Pearl met my eyes. And you know what you're doing. You just need to remember that you know. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something stirring. In my chest that wasn't fear or shame or confusion. It was ambition. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I put on my sharpest business attire and walked into Morrison & Associates like I belonged there. Crystal's father, Richard Morrison, greeted me with surprised warmth in his corner office overlooking downtown Chicago's financial district. Naomi Chen, what a pleasant surprise. It's been, 6 years since you left us? His silver-haired authority commanded respect throughout the city's real estate circles. I always wondered what happened to one of our brightest analysts. I got married, I said simply, settling into the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. But I'm considering returning to the workforce, and I wanted to speak with you about the current market. What Richard didn't know was that I had an ulterior motive. Crystal had been sloppy in some of her emails, mentioning Dad's client connections, and leveraging Morrison contacts for her shell company operations. I needed to understand exactly how deep this conspiracy went. You picked an interesting time to return, Richard said, pulling up market reports on his computer. The mortgage industry is experiencing some unusual fluctuations. Several local banks are over-leveraged on construction loans, particularly First National. My pulse quickened. First National, the same bank where Rudy and Crystal had orchestrated my humiliation yesterday. What kind of troubles? They've been approving high-risk construction loans with insufficient collateral. Someone's been feeding them falsified financial statements and property valuations. He leaned back in his chair. The State Banking Commission is launching an investigation next month. I kept my expression neutral despite the racing thoughts. That sounds serious. It is. Whoever's been manipulating these loan approvals could face federal charges: wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy. Richard's eyes sharpened. Why the sudden interest in banking regulations? I'm considering real estate investment. I want to understand the risks. I paused, then took a calculated gamble. Richard, can I ask you something confidential? About Crystal? His expression immediately became guarded. What about Crystal? Has she been using Morrison Associates' name or connections for her personal real estate transactions? Because I've heard some concerning rumors. Richard was quiet for a long moment, studying me with the sharp eyes that had built his empire. Naomi, what exactly do you know? I know that your daughter has been involved in some questionable property deals. And I know that several of them connect to my husband's construction company and First National Bank. Jesus Christ. Richard rubbed his forehead. I was afraid of this. You knew? I suspected. Crystal has been requesting client lists, asking about our high net worth contacts, wanting access to our property valuation software. When I questioned her about it, she said she was building her own client base. He pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. But then I started noticing some irregularities. The folder contained property records, loan applications, and financial statements. As I reviewed them, a pattern emerged that made my blood run cold. Crystal hadn't just been planning my destruction. She'd been running a sophisticated fraud. Operation targeting multiple couples. Look at this, Richard said, pointing to a series of transactions. 5 different properties, all purchased by shell companies Crystal created, all with mortgage applications containing falsified financial information. The pattern is always the same. Married couple, one spouse with limited financial knowledge, sudden foreclosure, property transferred to Crystal's companies at below-market prices. She's done this before? At least 4 other times that I can prove, always targeting women who were financially dependent on their husbands. She and her associates would systematically isolate the wives, manipulate the husbands, then execute coordinated foreclosures. My hands trembled as I read the files. Sarah and Michael Thompson, divorced after foreclosure. Sarah disappeared. Last known address, a homeless shelter. Jennifer and Denver Walsh. Jennifer found dead in her car 3 months after losing their house, ruled suicide. Ava Martinez, still missing after her husband left her at their bank with foreclosure papers. Ava Martinez, I whispered. When? 2 years ago. Denver Walsh was her husband. The police investigation went nowhere because technically no laws were broken. The foreclosure was legal. The husband had every right to divorce her and keep the assets. The names hit me like physical blows. Denver, one of the male names from my preferred list, but this was real. These were real women who had suffered the same systematic destruction I was experiencing. Richard, I need to know, are you involved in this? His face went pale. God, no. Naomi, when I realized what Crystal was doing, I cut off her access to our systems. But she'd already copied enough client information to last years. I should have reported her to the authorities, but she's my daughter. I thought I could handle it privately. By handle it privately, you mean what? I've been documenting everything, building a case. I was planning to confront her next week, give her a chance to make restitution before I turned the evidence over to the FBI. I stared at him. The FBI? Naomi, this isn't just real estate fraud. Crystal and her associates have been systematically targeting vulnerable women, destroying their lives, and profiting from their misery. This is organized crime. The room felt like it was spinning. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband and his mistress. I was up against a criminal organization that had perfected the art of destroying women like me. Who else is involved? Richard hesitated, then pulled out another file. Based on my investigation, there's a network. Crystal coordinates the real estate aspects, but she works with corrupt loan officers, fraudulent appraisers, and complicit attorneys. They target specific demographics: women aged 25 to 40, married to men with construction or contracting businesses, limited independent income. Why construction and contracting? Cash flow is unpredictable in those industries. Easy to hide money, easy to claim temporary financial hardship, easy to justify foreclosure. Plus, construction workers tend to have traditional views about women and money, less likely to give their wives financial independence. I thought about Rudy's friends, the men who came to our barbecues and poker nights. Finn, who owned a plumbing company. Michael, who ran an electrical contracting business. Neil, who had a landscaping operation. All of them married to women who didn't work outside the home. How many couples are they targeting currently? I don't know exactly, but based on the loan applications I've seen at First National, at least 3 active cases, maybe more. I need those files. Richard studied me carefully. Naomi, what are you planning? I'm planning to stop them. This is dangerous. These people have destroyed lives, possibly killed people. You should go to the police with what you know? With what evidence? Everything you've shown me is circumstantial. And by the time the police investigate, how many more women will disappear like Eva Martinez? I stood up, decision crystallizing. Richard, I need a favor. A big one. What kind of favor? I need you to hire me back, officially, with full access to your international property databases and your connections in overseas markets. Naomi, they think I'm broken. They think I'm helpless. They've spent 4 years convincing me that I'm nothing without Rudy. I met his eyes with steel I didn't know I possessed. I'm going to use their underestimation of me to destroy them, but I need legitimate business credentials to do it. Richard was quiet for a long moment. What you're proposing sounds like vigilante justice. What I'm proposing is using their own tactics against them. They destroy women through financial manipulation and social isolation. I'm going to beat them at their own game. And if they figure out what you're doing? I thought about Jennifer Martinez, found dead in her car. About Eva Martinez, still missing. About Sarah Thompson living in a homeless shelter. Then at least I'll go down fighting instead of disappearing quietly like they planned. Richard opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card holder. He wrote something on the back of a card and handed it to me. Naomi Chen, Senior International Property Analyst, Morrison & Associates. Your salary starts Monday. But Naomi? His expression was grave. Be very, very careful. These people don't just ruin lives. They end them. I pocketed the card and headed for the door. For the first time in 4 years, I had a plan. And for the first time in my life, I was truly dangerous. That night, I sat in Pearl's spare bedroom surrounded by printed emails, bank records, and victim files, creating a timeline of my destruction. But as I traced the patterns of Crystal's operation, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of their conspiracy, I felt my mind sharpening with each connection I made. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a business model, and every business model had weaknesses. I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't done in 6 years. I created a spreadsheet. Not a household budget or grocery list, but a complex financial analysis mapping Crystal's shell companies, their property holdings, and their cash flows. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory I'd forgotten I possessed. Morrison Holdings, LLC, Crystal Properties International, Chicago Investment Partners. Each company was registered to different addresses, but the banking information led back to the same source. Accounts at First National Bank, managed by the same loan officer who had processed my foreclosure. Eva Martinez's case file lay open beside my laptop. According to the police report, she had simply vanished after being served foreclosure papers. Her husband, Denver, claimed she'd left voluntarily, but there was no paper trail, no credit card usage, no phone activity. She had effectively ceased to exist. But I found her. 3 hours of database searches through Morrison Associates International. Property records revealed something the police had missed. Eva Martinez hadn't disappeared. She'd been erased. Her identity had been stolen and used to purchase property in Crystal's name. Eva Martinez officially owned a condo in Miami Beach worth $800,000. A condo she'd never seen, bought with money stolen from her own foreclosure. My hands shook as I printed the property records. Eva Martinez was either dead, or she was living somewhere with no legal identity while her stolen name generated income for her destroyers. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I'd found in the police report. Detective Williams, this is Naomi Chen. I have information about the Eva Martinez missing person case. Ma'am, that case was closed 2 years ago. Voluntary departure. Detective, Eva Martinez owns property in Florida worth $800,000. Property purchased after she supposedly disappeared. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Can you repeat that? I'm sending you documents right now. Eva Martinez's identity has been stolen to commit real estate fraud. This isn't a missing person case. It's identity theft and possibly murder. Mrs. Chen, how did you obtain these property records? I work for Morrison Associates. I have legitimate access to these databases. The lie came smoothly. Technically, I would start working there Monday. Detective, there are at least 4 other women who've suffered the same pattern. This is organized crime. I'll need to see everything you have. I looked at the files spread across Pearl's dining table. Evidence of a criminal conspiracy that had destroyed multiple families. Evidence that could bring down Crystal's entire operation. Detective, I'll cooperate fully, but I need a guarantee. These people are dangerous. If they realize I'm gathering evidence against them. Mrs. Chen, are you in immediate danger? I thought about Jennifer Martinez, found dead 3 months after her foreclosure. Possibly. My husband is involved with Crystal Morrison. They just foreclosed on my house using the same pattern as the other victims. Where are you now? Safe location. But detective, I don't want protection. I want to be bait. Excuse me? They think they've broken me. They think I'm helpless and defeated. I want to use that assumption to gather more evidence. But I need to know that when I'm ready to take them down, the police will be ready to act. Detective Williams was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Chen. What? You're suggesting sounds like undercover work. You're not trained for this. I'm trained for financial analysis. This is a financial crime. I can trace their money laundering, their property schemes, their shell companies better than any police investigator because I understand the real estate market. And if they realize what you're doing? I stared at Eva Martinez's photo in the bay. Police file. 28 years old. Dark hair. Bright smile. She looked like she could have been my sister. Then at least someone will know the truth about what happened to these women. Mrs. Chen, I can't officially sanction civilian involvement in an active investigation. But unofficially? Another long pause. Unofficially, if you happen to discover additional evidence of criminal activity in the course of your legitimate employment, and if you happen to share that information with law enforcement, we would be grateful for your civic cooperation. Detective, I need to ask you something personal. Do you have a wife? Daughters? Both. Then you understand why I can't just disappear quietly and let them move on to the next victim. I understand. But Mrs. Chen, promise me something. The moment you feel unsafe, the moment anything seems wrong, you contact me immediately. I promise. After I hung up, I sat staring at my reflection in Pearl's darkened window. For 8 years, I'd been trained to be small, quiet, grateful, and invisible. But the woman looking back at me now had eyes that burned with purpose. Crystal and Rudy had made one critical miscalculation in their systematic destruction of my identity. They had assumed that dependency was the same thing as incapability. They had confused compliance with weakness. They were about to learn the difference. I opened my laptop and began typing. Phase 1. Establish new identity. Return to Morrison Associates. As legitimate employee, rebuild professional network and credentials. Document all current criminal activities. Phase 2. Infiltrate their operation, gain Crystal's trust by appearing defeated, access their financial records and client lists, identify current victims and prevent future targeting. Phase 3. Systematic destruction. Expose all criminal activities to authorities. Ensure asset recovery for previous victims. Destroy their ability to harm anyone else. I paused, then added one final line. Phase 4. Personal justice. Acquire their assets through legal means. Ensure they lose everything they stole from others. Watch them experience the helplessness they inflicted. For the first time in 4 years, I smiled with genuine joy. The hunt was about to begin. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, perfect weather for invisibility. I stood outside Morrison & Associates at 7 a.m., watching through the glass lobby as Crystal arrived for what I'd learned was her weekly breakfast meeting with her father. She looked radiant, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who believed she'd just executed the perfect crime. I waited until she entered the elevator, then slipped through the side entrance using the employee keycard Richard had given me. My new office was on the 3rd floor, small, but with access to all the international property databases I'd need. More importantly, it had a clear view of the conference room where Crystal conducted her weekly progress reports. The morning was spent establishing my cover story. I called potential clients, researched legitimate investment opportunities, and created the appearance of a woman desperately trying to rebuild her career after a devastating divorce. Anyone monitoring my activities would see exactly what Crystal and Rudy expected: a broken woman grasping for financial independence. But beneath that performance, I was laying groundwork for something far more sophisticated. At lunch, I drove to a small internet cafe in Chinatown and accessed encrypted email accounts I'd created using Eva Martinez's research techniques. The missing woman had been more resourceful than anyone realized. Her social media profiles contained subtle breadcrumbs leading to hidden forums where financial abuse victims shared survival strategies. Protected, woman, 47. Ladies, I'm beginning to gather evidence against a group that's targeting women like us. If you've experienced sudden foreclosure combined with spousal abandonment in the Chicago area, please contact me privately. We're stronger together. Within hours, I had responses from 12 women. Sarah Thompson, who I'd thought was homeless, was actually living under an assumed name in Milwaukee, working as a hotel night clerk and slowly rebuilding her life. Jennifer Martinez wasn't dead. She'd faked her suicide and was hiding in Phoenix, terrified to use her real identity. Most shocking was a message from Eva Martinez herself. Rising from Ashes 2024. Naomi Chen? They think I'm dead. That was the plan. I've been documenting everything from hiding. Are you ready to fight back? Because I have evidence that could destroy them all. That evening, I met Eva at a truck stop outside the city. She was thinner than her photos, her hair dyed blonde, her eyes holding the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much. But her voice was steady as she handed me a thick envelope. 3 years I've been gathering this, she said. Bank records, recorded conversations, photographs of their meetings. I even have Crystal on tape admitting to the identity theft. The envelope contained a treasure trove of evidence, financial records showing the flow of money from foreclosed properties into Crystal's accounts, photos of Crystal and Rudy meeting with loan officers at First National. Most damning, a recording device Eva had hidden in Crystal's car during one of their friendship dinners. Crystal's voice crackled through my headphones. The Martinez woman was getting suspicious, asking too many questions about the foreclosure. Timeline. We might need to accelerate the elimination phase. Rudy's voice responded. Elimination meaning what, exactly? Meaning she disappears permanently. Car accident, suicide, whatever looks most natural. We can't risk her talking to investigators. They were planning to kill me, Eva said quietly. So I decided to die on my own terms. Faked the car accident, left just enough blood to make it look real, and vanished before they could finish the job. I stared at her, this woman who'd outsmarted her own murderers. How did you survive? Money, identity, shelter? The same way you're going to take them down. I turned their own system against them. Eva smiled grimly. I kept detailed records of every property they stole, every account they used, every shell company they created. When I disappeared, I took copies of everything. But you've been hiding for 3 years. Why didn't you go to the police? Because they own people in the police department. Because they have judges on payroll. Because women like us disappear and nobody looks too hard. Her eyes burned with controlled fury. But you have something I didn't have. Access. You're working inside Richard Morrison's company. You can get evidence that would hold up in federal court. We spent 2 hours going through her files, creating a comprehensive map of Crystal's criminal enterprise. It was larger than I'd imagined. At least 37 properties, 14 shell companies, and connections to corrupt officials in 3 states. Eva, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not just planning to expose them. I'm planning to take everything they've stolen. Good. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Because I've been buying property under various corporate names for 3 years. Nothing traceable to me, all legitimate purchases. When their empire falls, I want to be in position to acquire their assets at auction. We're going to need help. Other victims, financial experts, maybe some attorneys. I've been building a network. Women they discarded, men they cheated, business partners they betrayed. We're not just victims anymore, Naomi. We're an army. She handed me a prepaid phone. Encrypted communications only. Never use your real phone or computer for anything connected to this operation. And Naomi? She gripped my shoulder. Trust no one completely. They've infiltrated law enforcement, banking, and legal systems. The only people you can absolutely count on are other women they've tried to destroy. Driving home through the rain, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. This wasn't just about revenge against Rudy and Crystal anymore. This was about justice for dozens of women, recovery of millions in stolen assets, and dismantling a criminal organization that had operated with impunity for years. But first, I had to convince Crystal and Rudy that I was exactly what they believed me to be. A broken woman who posed no threat to their carefully constructed empire. The performance of my life was about to begin. The next morning, I did something that required every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I called Rudy and begged him to meet me for coffee. My voice shook with just the right amount of desperation as I explained that I needed to discuss practical matters about our separation. He agreed to meet at Romano's Cafe, the same place where he'd proposed 6 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived early and chose a corner table with clear sightlines to both entrances. Eva's training had been thorough. Always know your exits. Always control the environment. Always have backup plans. The micro recorder in my purse was voice-activated, and Detective Williams was parked 2 blocks away, ready to respond if things went wrong. Rudy walked in 15 minutes late, wearing the navy suit I'd bought him for his birthday. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who'd successfully disposed of an inconvenient problem. He slid into the seat across from me with the casual arrogance I'd once mistaken for charm. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Are you sleeping?" "Not much." I let my voice waver. "Rudy, I don't understand what happened. 3 days ago we were married, and now I have nothing. No home, no money, no future. How did everything fall apart so quickly?" His expression softened slightly, and I saw a flicker of what might have been guilt. Good. Guilt could be weaponized. "Naomi, we both know this marriage has been over for a long time. We just weren't honest about it. But I love you." The words tasted like poison, but they had the desired effect. Rudy's shoulders relaxed as his ego absorbed the confirmation that he was still the center of my universe. "I know you do. And I care about you too, which is why I want to make this transition as easy as possible." He reached across the table and patted my hand like he was comforting a child. "Crystal and I have been talking, and we want to help you. Get back on your feet." "Crystal wants to help me?" I infused my voice with pathetic hope. "She feels bad about how everything happened. The timing, the public nature of it. She suggested that maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement to help you transition to independence." I blinked back tears I didn't have to fake. Not tears of sadness, but tears of rage at his patronizing tone. "What kind of arrangement?" "Well, Crystal has connections in the real estate industry. She might be able to find you some administrative work, something entry-level to help you build experience." The audacity was breathtaking. Crystal wanted to offer me a job working for the woman who'd orchestrated my destruction, but I forced gratitude into my expression. That's so generous of her. I was so worried about how I'd survive on my own. "You won't have to survive on your own. We'll take care of you. Make sure you land somewhere safe." Rudy's voice carried the condescending kindness of someone addressing a wounded animal. "Why don't you come to dinner tomorrow night? Crystal's cooking, and we can discuss the details. Dinner at my former house, prepared by my replacement, to discuss my future employment with my destroyers." The psychological torture was masterful. "Are you sure Crystal won't mind? I mean, this must be awkward for her too. Crystal's a very understanding woman. She knows that our marriage ending isn't really anyone's fault. Sometimes people just grow apart." I nodded eagerly, playing the grateful victim accepting scraps from her betters. Inside, I was cataloging every word for the recording device, every condescending gesture for the testimony I'd eventually give. "Rudy, can I ask you something? And please be honest." "Of course. How long have you been unhappy?" "Because I keep going over everything in my mind, trying to figure out where I went wrong." His expression became thoughtful, almost philosophical. "You didn't go wrong exactly. You just stayed the same while I outgrew you. When we met, you were perfect for who I was then, but successful men need partners who can match their evolution." "What do you mean?" "Crystal understands business. She has her own career, her own ambitions. She challenges me intellectually in ways that—" He paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. "In ways that you never could." "Because I'm not smart." "Enough?" "It's not about intelligence, Naomi. It's about sophistication, about understanding how the world really works." He leaned forward, warming to his theme. "You've always been sheltered, protected. Crystal operates in the real world where success requires making hard choices. Hard choices like what? Like recognizing when something isn't working and having the courage to change it. Like being strategic about relationships and partnerships instead of just hoping everything works out." I absorbed this insight into his worldview, the casual cruelty disguised as pragmatism, the reduction of human relationships to strategic assets. He was telling me exactly how he justified destroying people's lives. I wish I could be more like Crystal. I said softly. Maybe you can learn. She's offered to mentor you, help you develop some practical skills. Think of this as an opportunity for growth. The recorder was capturing every word of his patronizing offer, to let the woman who'd destroyed my life teach me how to be more successful. The evidence would be devastating in court, but more importantly, it confirmed everything Eva had told me about their psychology. They genuinely believed they were superior beings helping inferior people accept their proper place in the world. Their arrogance would be their downfall. Tomorrow night, then? I asked, letting eagerness creep into my voice. 7 o'clock. And Naomi? Try to see this as a new beginning. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to someone is having their old life completely destroyed. It forces you to discover who you really are. As he walked away, I remained seated, watching him through the cafe window as he climbed into the BMW I'd helped him buy. His words echoed in my mind. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to someone is having their old life completely destroyed. He was absolutely right, and he was about to discover exactly who I really was. 7 o'clock arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the universe was mocking the chill in my heart. I stood on the porch of what had been my home for 8 years, holding a bottle of wine and wearing the humble expression of a woman grateful for charity. Through the window, I could see Crystal moving around my kitchen with the confidence of ownership, using my grandmother's china to set the table. Rudy opened the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Naomi? Right on time. Come in. Come in. The house felt alien, even though nothing had physically changed. Crystal had rearranged the living room furniture, replacing my family photos with abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. The scent of expensive candles had replaced the lavender sachets I'd always kept in the linen closets. I hope you don't mind, but I've made a few updates, Crystal said, emerging from the kitchen wearing my apron, my grandmother's apron that she'd sewn by hand in 1952. The space needed a more sophisticated touch. It looks beautiful, I lied, my fingers unconsciously touching the hidden recorder in my jacket pocket. You have such wonderful taste, Crystal beamed, clearly pleased with the compliment. Thank you. I've been wanting to renovate this place for years. The potential was always there. It just needed someone with vision to bring it out. The casual cruelty of the statement, that my home had been lacking until she improved it, was delivered with such sweetness that it took all my self-control not to react. Instead, I nodded appreciatively, playing my role as the grateful recipient of their wisdom. Dinner's almost ready, Crystal continued. Why don't we sit in the living room? I made your favorite, beef Wellington. My favorite, except beef Wellington, had never been my favorite. I'd made it once for Rudy's birthday 3 years ago, struggling with the pastry because I'd never attempted anything so complex. He'd complained that it was overcooked and suggested I stick to simpler dishes in the future. But Crystal had transformed that humiliating failure into my favorite, probably because it showcased her superior culinary skills. The psychological manipulation was subtle but devastating, rewriting my own preferences to better serve their narrative. We settled in the living room, where Rudy poured wine into glasses I recognized as wedding gifts from my college roommate. Everything around me had been mine, but now I was a guest in my own former life. So, Rudy said, settling into his leather chair, the one I'd saved for months to buy him for Father's Day 2 years ago, back when we were still trying to have children. Crystal has some exciting opportunities to discuss with you. Crystal, perched on the edge of the sofa, her body language suggesting barely contained excitement. Naomi, I've been thinking about your situation, and I believe I have the perfect solution. I'm listening. Morrison & Associates handles a lot of international clients, and they need someone to manage basic administrative tasks, filing, data entry, client communications. It's entry-level, but it could be a good way for you to rebuild your resume. The job she was describing was almost exactly what I was actually doing, except she was positioning it as charity work for an incompetent woman. rather than the senior analyst position I actually held. The irony was delicious. That sounds wonderful, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for international business. Oh, don't worry about that, Crystal waved dismissively. It's mostly just organizing documents and making copies. Nothing too complex. And the best part is, my father owns the company, so he'd be willing to overlook your lack of recent work experience. Your father owns Morrison and Associates? I let surprise color my voice, as if this was new information. He does, and he's willing to give you a chance because Rudy and I vouched for your character. Crystal's smile was radiant with false generosity. Of course you'd need to prove yourself. Show up on time, follow instructions, demonstrate that you can handle responsibility. The condescension was breathtaking. She was offering me my own job while explaining that I'd need to prove I could handle basic human functions like punctuality. There is one small condition, Rudy interjected, his tone becoming more serious. What kind of condition? Complete discretion about our personal situation. Crystal's father doesn't need to know about the details of our divorce or the circumstances of your transition. It might reflect poorly on all of us. Translation: don't tell anyone that we destroyed your life and are now magnanimously offering you scraps to survive on. Of course, I would never want to cause problems for either of you. Excellent. Crystal stood up, moving toward the dining room. Now, let's eat before everything gets cold. The dining room table was set with my grandmother's china, the pattern I'd grown up admiring during Sunday dinners. Crystal had even used the good silverware, the set my parents had given us as a wedding gift. Every element of the table setting told the story of my erasure. My belongings now served their celebration. As Crystal brought out the beef Wellington, perfectly golden and clearly expensive, I marveled at the performance. They had invited me to dinner in my former home, served by my replacement, using my possessions, to offer me charity employment while congratulating themselves on their generosity. This looks incredible, I said, accepting a plate from Crystal. You're such an amazing cook. Thank you. I actually took classes at the Culinary Institute last year. I believe in constantly improving myself, learning new skills. The implication was clear, unlike some people who remained stagnant. As we ate, they regaled me with stories of their relationship, their future plans, their shared vision of success. Rudy described the house renovations they were planning. Crystal discussed her expanding real estate empire. They painted a picture of a dynamic, ambitious couple ascending to greater heights. And through it all, they spoke to me with the kindly condescension reserved for those who've accepted their place in the world's hierarchy. A failed wife gracefully stepping aside for her superior replacement. If only they knew that every word was being recorded, that their victim was actually their hunter, and that the woman sitting at their table was methodically cataloging their weaknesses while planning their destruction. To new beginnings. Rudy raised his wine glass in a toast. To new beginnings, I echoed, meeting their eyes with perfect gratitude. Indeed. The morning after dinner, I walked into Morrison and Associates with a spring in my step that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the devastating recording device in my purse. Crystal and Rudy had given me exactly what I needed, a full confession of their criminal enterprise delivered with wine and beef Wellington. Richard. Morrison was waiting in his office with coffee and a grim expression. How did it go? I placed the recorder on his desk and pressed play. For the next hour, we listened to Crystal describe her mentorship opportunities for vulnerable women, Rudy explain his philosophy of strategic relationship management, and both of them detail their plans for expanding their operation to other cities. Jesus Christ, Richard whispered when the recording ended. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. They think they're untouchable. They are untouchable, as long as everyone believes their victims are willing participants in their own destruction. I pulled out my laptop and opened the comprehensive file I'd been building. But Richard, there's something else. Something bigger than just real estate fraud. the screen filled with financial data I'd been analyzing for the past week. Shell. Companies, offshore accounts, and investment portfolios that painted a picture of systematic money laundering. They're not just stealing houses. They're running a sophisticated financial crime operation that's generated over $40 million in the past 5 years. I pointed to specific transactions. Look at this pattern. They foreclose on properties, sell them through shell companies, at below-market prices, then immediately flip them for huge profits. The difference goes into offshore accounts. But that's not illegal if the foreclosures are legitimate. Except the foreclosures aren't legitimate. They're based on falsified financial documents, fraudulent loan applications, and manufactured defaults. I pulled up bank records Eva had provided. Crystal has been bribing loan officers at First National to approve mortgages for people who can't afford them, then triggering foreclosure proceedings the moment the victims become inconvenient. Richard studied the data with the sharp eyes that had built his real estate empire. This is RICO territory, organized crime, federal prosecution. Which is why we need to move carefully. Eva Martinez has been building a case for 3 years, but she needed someone on the inside to gather admissible evidence. I met his eyes. That someone is me. Naomi, what exactly are you planning? Phase 1 is already complete. I have their confession and financial records. Phase 2 requires me to get closer to their operation, document their current crimes, and identify their co-conspirators. And Phase 3? I smiled with an edge that surprised even me. Phase 3 is where I stop being their victim and become their nightmare. My phone buzzed with a text from Crystal. Dad confirmed your interview for Monday. So excited to have you on the team. Lunch today to celebrate? Perfect timing, I murmured, showing Richard the message. She wants to celebrate my employment at the company where I'm already building the case against her. Be careful, Naomi. If she suspects anything, she won't. I'm going to give her exactly what she expects to see. A grateful, broken woman who's accepted her place in their hierarchy. That afternoon, I met Crystal at an upscale bistro in Lincoln Park, the kind of place where successful women conducted business over expensive salads. She was already seated when I arrived, scrolling through her phone with the confidence of someone who owned the world. Naomi, you look so much better today. More hopeful. Crystal stood to hug me, and I caught the scent of the perfume I used to wear. My signature fragrance that she'd apparently adopted along with my husband and my house. I feel hopeful. For the first time in months, I feel like there might be a future for me. That's wonderful to hear. You know, I was telling Rudy last night how impressed I am with your attitude. A lot of women would be bitter about our situation, but you're handling it with such grace. What's the point of being bitter? You and Rudy found something special together. I can't compete with that, and I wouldn't want to. I injected just the right amount of wistful sadness into my voice. I just want to rebuild my life and maybe find my own happiness someday. Crystal's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine affection. You're going to find someone wonderful, Naomi. Someone who appreciates your domestic qualities. Domestic qualities. The casual dismissal of my intelligence, my education, my capabilities, delivered like a compliment. But I smiled gratefully and nodded. I hope so. In the meantime, I'm just grateful for this opportunity to work again. I've missed having purpose. Well, you'll have plenty of purpose at Morrison & Associates. Dad has some international projects that need basic administrative support. Nothing too challenging. Just organizing files, entering data, that sort of thing. That sounds perfect. I don't want too much responsibility while I'm still adjusting to being on my own. Crystal leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, this job could lead to bigger things if you prove yourself. Dad has connections all over the world, and he's always looking for reliable people to help with overseas investments. Overseas investments? Property acquisitions mostly. Sometimes American investors want to buy real estate in other countries, but need local administrative support. The pay is excellent, and there's a lot of travel involved. My pulse quickened. She was describing exactly the kind of international money laundering operation Eva and I had theorized about. Crystal wasn't just offering me a job, she was recruiting me as an unwitting accomplice in their global financial crimes. That sounds amazing. I've always wanted to travel. I thought you might. And the best part is, these overseas positions offer a lot of independence. You could build a whole new life somewhere far from all the memories here. The final piece of their strategy became clear. They weren't just destroying women financially, they were isolating them geographically, sending them overseas where they'd be completely cut off from any support system, completely dependent on Crystal's organization for survival. Crystal, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How do you do it? How do you balance being so successful with being so kind? Most businesswomen I've known are... I paused, as if searching for diplomatic phrasing. Less generous with their time and energy. Crystal's smile became radiant. You know what? I believe in sisterhood. I believe in lifting other women up instead of tearing them down. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We have to support each other, especially when life gets difficult. The words were delivered with such apparent sincerity that I almost admired the performance. Crystal had perfected the art of weaponizing female solidarity, using the language of empowerment to destroy the very women she claimed to support. Thank you, I whispered, letting my voice crack slightly. I don't know what I would have done without your kindness. That's what friends are for. As I drove home, Crystal's final words echoed in my mind. Friends. She genuinely believed that destroying my life and offering me the pieces back as charity made us friends. Eva was right. These people didn't just lack empathy, they had rewritten the definitions of friendship, kindness, and sisterhood to justify their cruelty. But they had also made a critical error. In their arrogance, they had invited their primary target into the heart of their operation. The hunter was now inside the den. My first official day at Morrison & Associates began with Crystal personally escorting me to what she called the International filing room, a windowless office in the basement filled with bankers' boxes and outdated computer equipment. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. They had literally put me in the basement, surrounded by the detritus of other people's financial lives. This is where you'll be working, Crystal announced cheerfully, gesturing to a metal desk that looked like it belonged in a 1980s government office. Don't worry about the location. Some of our most important work happens down here, away from distractions. Translation. Away from witnesses. It's perfect, I said, settling into the uncomfortable chair and surveying my new domain. Quiet and private. I work better without a lot of people around. Exactly what I hoped you'd say. Now, your first project is organizing these client files. She indicated a stack of boxes that reached nearly to the ceiling. They need to be sorted chronologically, then entered into our database. Think you can handle that? I nodded eagerly, and Crystal handed me a thick manila folder. These are the data entry guidelines. Follow them exactly. No creativity, no interpretation, just precise adherence to the format. After she left, I opened the first box and immediately understood why they'd been so insistent about exact adherence to format. These weren't random client files. They were detailed records of every property theft Crystal's organization had committed over the past 8 years. Sarah Thompson's file contained her original mortgage application, her husband's business records, bank statements showing the systematic draining of their joint accounts, and finally, the foreclosure documents that had destroyed her life. But more importantly, it contained handwritten notes in Crystal's distinctive script. Subject isolated from family support. Recommend acceleration to Phase 3. Eva Martinez's file was even more comprehensive. Not only did it document her financial destruction, But it included surveillance photos of her daily routines, copies of her private correspondence, and psychological profiles that read like military intelligence reports. Subject demonstrates higher than average intelligence and strong analytical capabilities. Recommend permanent elimination rather than standard relocation protocol. My hands trembled as I read that note. They hadn't just planned to destroy Eva. Financially, they had specifically targeted her for murder because she was smart enough to figure out their operation. But the most shocking discovery was in a file labeled Current Operations. Inside were active profiles for 7 women currently being targeted. 7 women who had no idea their lives were about to be systematically destroyed. Pearl's name was at the top of the list. My sister, who lived 3 hours away in Los Angeles, who I'd thought was safely distant from Rudy and Crystal's reach, was being actively investigated. The file contained her work address, her apartment building's security codes, photos of her daily commute, and financial records that could only have been obtained through illegal means. The targeting strategy was clear. They planned to use me to get closer to Pearl, then recruit her for one of their overseas opportunities, where she could be eliminated far from any potential investigation. I photographed every page with the micro camera Eva had given me, my training taking over despite the emotional shock. Professional documentation now, emotional processing later. The next box contained something even more disturbing: files on women who had successfully escaped their initial targeting. These women had somehow avoided the full destruction protocol, but Crystal's organization was continuing to track them, waiting for opportunities to complete their original objectives. Jennifer Martinez, who everyone believed was dead, was listed as Target Reacquisition Priority 1. They knew she was alive, knew she was hiding in Phoenix, and were actively planning to finish what they'd started. But there was something else in Jennifer's file that made my blood freeze. A medical report dated 3 months before her supposed suicide, confirming pregnancy. Jennifer Martinez hadn't just been hiding from her destroyers. She'd been protecting an unborn child. The scope of their evil was breathtaking. They weren't just stealing property and destroying lives. They were hunting pregnant women, children, anyone who posed a theoretical threat to their operation. By lunchtime, I had documented evidence of crimes spanning 8 years, across 4 states, targeting over 200 women. This wasn't just real estate fraud. It was systematic terrorism against vulnerable women, conducted with the precision and resources of a military operation. My phone buzzed with a text from Eva. Package. Delivered to your secure location. Check it tonight. We're moving to Phase 2. The package turned out to be a complete new identity. Passport, driver's license, credit cards, and bank accounts, all in the name of Isabella Reeves. Eva had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, building infrastructure that would allow us to operate internationally without detection. From this point forward, Eva explained during our encrypted phone call that evening, you're living a double life. Naomi Chen is the broken victim working in Crystal's basement. Isabella Reeves is the international property investor building the network that will destroy them. How do I maintain both identities without getting caught? Carefully. And with help from people who've been preparing for this war longer than you realize. That evening, I received an encrypted email from an address I didn't recognize. sarah.reborn.warriorsecuremail.net. Naomi, this is Sarah Thompson. Eva told me you're ready to fight back. I've been working with a network of survivors for 2 years, and we're ready to support your operation. We have safe houses in 12 cities, financial resources they can't trace, and technical capabilities they don't know exist. You're not alone in this. None of us are alone anymore. Attached to the email was a list of names. 37 women who had survived Crystal's organization and were now working together to bring it down. Each name represented a life destroyed, a family torn apart, a woman who had clawed her way back from complete devastation. But more than that, Each name represented a resource in the war we were about to wage. Women with specialized skills, connections, and knowledge that could be weaponized against their former destroyers. I opened my laptop and began typing my response. Sarah, thank you for reaching out. I'm ready to coordinate our efforts. But I want you to know, this isn't just about justice anymore. This is about completely dismantling their ability to harm anyone ever again. We're going to take everything they've stolen, destroy everything they've built, and leave them with nothing but the consequences of their choices. I paused, then added, and we're going to enjoy every minute of it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't running from my destroyers. I was hunting them. 3 weeks into my basement filing job, I had become invisible in the most dangerous way possible. Crystal and her associates had grown so comfortable with my presence that they conducted business as if I wasn't there. The basement office had become my intelligence center, where I documented every conversation, every phone call, every piece of evidence that floated down from the floors above. But documentation wasn't enough anymore. Eva's encrypted messages had become increasingly urgent. We need real-time financial data. Can you access their active accounts? The answer was no. Despite my access to historical files, I had no way to monitor their current operations or predict their next moves. That changed the day Michael Torres walked into my basement office. You must be Naomi, he said, extending a hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm Michael, Crystal's technology consultant. She asked me to set up some new security protocols for the international files. Michael was younger than I'd expected, maybe 28, with the casual confidence of someone who spoke fluent code. But there was something in his expression as he surveyed my workspace, a flicker of recognition that set off alarms in my mind. Nice setup you have down here, he continued, examining my computer terminal. Lot of sensitive information flowing through this system. Just basic filing, I replied carefully. Nothing too exciting. Oh, I think you're being modest. Michael's smile sharpened. Eva Martinez sends her regards. My blood froze. Either Michael was working with Eva, or I was about to be exposed as a spy. But his next words clarified everything. She asked me to teach you some new skills that might help with your career development. Michael turned out to be a former NSA cybersecurity specialist who had discovered Crystal's organization when they targeted his sister 2 years ago. Like Eva and Sarah, he had chosen to fight back rather than run away. But his weapons were digital rather than physical. First lesson, he said, connecting a small device to my computer. This is a keylogger. It'll capture every password, every login, every piece of financial data that gets entered on this terminal. Won't they detect it? Not if we're smart about it. This model mimics normal system processes. To anyone running standard security scans, it'll look like routine operating system functions. Over the next 2 hours, Michael transformed my basement office into a sophisticated surveillance center. Hidden cameras, audio recorders, network monitoring tools, everything I needed to document Crystal's organization in real time. But the real game changer, he said, installing software on my computer, is this financial tracking program. It'll monitor every transaction, every wire transfer, every digital payment that flows through Morrison & Associates network. How is that legal? It's not. But then again, neither is identity theft, mortgage fraud, or murder. Michael's expression darkened. My sister didn't survive their relocation program. This isn't about legal anymore. This is about justice. The software was elegantly simple. Every financial transaction would be automatically copied to an encrypted server that Eva's network controlled. Within days, we would have real-time visibility into every aspect of Crystal's money laundering operation. There's one more thing, Michael said, handing me a sophisticated smartphone that looked identical to my regular phone. This will let you communicate securely with our network, access the financial monitoring system, and coordinate operations. But Naomi? His expression became deadly serious. Never let them see this phone. If they discover what you're really doing down here. I know. Jennifer Martinez wasn't the only one who didn't survive. The first major breakthrough came 3 days later. The financial monitoring system lit up with a massive transaction. $5 million transferred from First National Bank to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. But the transfer wasn't initiated by Crystal or Rudy. It was authorized by David Chen, Rudy's younger brother. I stared at the screen in shock. David, who I'd always liked, who seemed like the moral center of Rudy's family, was part of the criminal organization. The transfer was connected to a property in Miami Beach, the same property purchased using Eva Martinez's stolen identity. But there was more. The financial data revealed a pattern I hadn't seen before. David wasn't just helping with money laundering. He was running his own parallel operation, targeting Asian American families through a network of community organizations and cultural centers. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Eva. David Chen has been operating independently for 18 months. At least 12 families destroyed. We need to move faster. The scope was staggering. What I'd thought was Crystal's criminal organization was actually a hydra with multiple heads, each targeting different communities, all coordinating to maximize damage while minimizing detection. I called Pearl that night using the secure phone, breaking protocol because I needed to hear my sister's voice. Naomi? You sound different. Stronger. I am stronger. Pearl, I need you to do something for me. And I can't explain why. Anything. Cancel any financial appointments you have scheduled for the next month. Don't sign any documents. Don't meet with any investment advisors. And don't trust anyone who approaches you about overseas opportunities. Naomi, you're scaring me. Good. Being scared will keep you alive. I paused, choosing my words carefully. The people who destroyed my marriage are part of something bigger, and they're targeting our family. I'm working to stop them, but I need you to stay safe while I do it. How can I help? By trusting me and staying exactly where you are. And Pearl? If anything happens to me, if I disappear, or if you hear that I've had an accident, contact Detective Williams in Chicago immediately. He has all the evidence. That night, I sat in my basement office surrounded by the tools Michael had given me, watching real-time financial data flow across my screen like a digital river of stolen lives. Each transaction represented a family destroyed, a woman disappeared, a life erased from existence. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just a victim gathering evidence. I was becoming something Crystal's organization had never encountered before, a predator who understood their methods better than they understood themselves. The hunter was learning to hunt, and soon it would be feeding time. 6 weeks into my role as Crystal's unwitting intelligence asset, everything changed with a single phone call. I was organizing files in my basement office when Richard Morrison's voice echoed through the building's intercom system. Crystal, please bring Naomi to the conference room. We have visitors. Crystal appeared at my office door within minutes, her expression unusually tense. Change of plans. Dad wants you upstairs for a client meeting. Me? But I'm just doing data entry. Apparently not anymore. Her smile was strained. Some international investors specifically requested someone with your background. My pulse quickened. Either my cover was blown, or something unexpected was happening. I followed Crystal to the elevator, my mind racing through possibilities while my hand unconsciously checked for the secure phone hidden in my jacket. The conference room was filled with people I didn't recognize. 5 men and 2 women in expensive suits, speaking in accented English that suggested European origins. At the head of the table sat Richard Morrison, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. Naomi, please sit down, Richard said, gesturing to an empty chair. These are representatives from Nordic Property Consortium, and they have a proposition that might interest you. The lead investor, a distinguished man with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. Ms. Chen, we understand you have experience with international property analysis and financial documentation. I kept my expression, neutral despite my confusion. Basic experience, yes. We represent a group of Scandinavian investors looking to acquire distressed properties in the American market. We need someone who can evaluate opportunities quickly and discreetly. His English was precise, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Crystal Morrison has recommended you highly. Crystal's smile was brilliant, but I caught the uncertainty in her eyes. This meeting wasn't planned by her, which meant someone else was orchestrating events. What kind of properties are you interested in? I asked. Foreclosed homes, primarily. Properties that have been recently acquired by banks or private investors. The woman beside him, elegant with platinum blonde hair, slid a portfolio across the table. We're particularly interested in properties that come with complete documentation of their previous ownership history. My blood went cold. They were describing exactly the kind of properties Crystal's organization specialized in stealing. But something felt wrong about these investors. Their questions were too specific, their interest too focused. The compensation would be substantial, the lead investor continued. $50,000 per property evaluation, plus bonuses for particularly valuable acquisitions. The work would require some travel, initially to Dubai, where we're establishing a Middle Eastern acquisition office. Dubai, the same city Ava had mentioned as a hub for international money laundering. The same destination Crystal had suggested for my fresh start. That's very generous, I said carefully. But I should mention that I'm still learning the international market. I wouldn't want to disappoint you. On the contrary, the platinum blonde woman said, her smile sharp as a blade. We prefer working with analysts who aren't set in their ways. Fresh perspectives often identify opportunities that experienced investors miss. The meeting lasted another 30 minutes, with increasingly specific questions about my availability, my passport status, and my willingness to relocate permanently overseas. By the end, I was certain these weren't legitimate investors. They were recruiters for Crystal's organization, setting up the next phase of my elimination. After they left, Crystal could barely contain her excitement. Naomi, this is incredible. A $50,000 salary plus bonuses. You could be making more in a year than most people make in 5. It does sound amazing. Almost too good to be true. That's exactly what I thought when Dad first told me about Nordic Consortium. But they're legitimate. They've already transferred $100,000 as a good faith deposit for your services. The lie came so smoothly that I almost believed her myself. These people had turned deception into an art form. When would I need to start? Next week. They want you in Dubai to begin evaluating their first set of properties. Crystal handed me a travel folder. Everything's arranged. Flights, accommodations, work visa. They've really thought of everything. That evening, I met Eva at our usual location, a truck stop outside the city where surveillance would be difficult. She listened to my report with growing alarm. They're accelerating your timeline, she said grimly. Usually they spend months preparing victims for overseas relocation. 6 weeks means they're either desperate or they suspect something. Could they know about the surveillance equipment? Possible. Or they might have other reasons for moving. Quickly. Eva pulled out her laptop and showed me financial data from Michael's monitoring system. Look at this. They've been liquidating assets rapidly over the past 2 weeks. Almost like they're preparing to shut down the entire Chicago operation. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If they're shutting down, what happens to the women they're currently targeting? Best case scenario? They disappear quietly and are forgotten. Worst case? They're eliminated to prevent potential witnesses. We can't let that happen, which is why we're moving to the final phase ahead of schedule. Eva's expression was steel. Naomi, I need you to go to Dubai. What? Eva, that's suicide. If they get me overseas, they won't get you, because you won't be going as Naomi Chen, their victim. You'll be going as Isabella Reeves, international property investor. She handed me a new passport and a thick portfolio. We've been building this identity for 3 years. Isabella Reeves has a spotless credit history, a legitimate business background, and more importantly, she has $2 million in verified assets. I stared at the documents. Where did $2 million come from? Recovered assets from previous victims, liquidated properties they thought they'd hidden, offshore accounts Michael hacked into. Eva's smile was sharp with satisfaction. We've been stealing their money the same way they stole it from others. One transaction at a time, carefully documented for future legal proceedings. So when I arrive in Dubai, you'll be their worst nightmare. A victim who survived, who learned their methods, and who has the resources to destroy them from the inside. Eva leaned forward. But Naomi, this is the most dangerous part of the operation. Once you're in Dubai, you'll be completely on your own until we can get other assets in position. How long? 2 weeks maximum. Enough time to document their international operation and identify their overseas assets for seizure. I looked at the Isabella Reeves passport, at the face that looked like mine, but belonged to someone far more dangerous than Naomi Chen had ever been. When do I leave? Tomorrow night. Crystal thinks you're flying commercial to meet their recruiters, but Isabella Reeves will be taking a private jet to establish her own business operations. For the first time in weeks, I smiled with genuine anticipation. The prey was about to become the predator. Dubai's skyline glittered like a crown of jewels as my private jet descended toward the city that would become the battleground for everything I'd lost and everything I intended to reclaim. But I wasn't arriving as Naomi Chen, the broken wife with 72 hours to vacate her foreclosed home. I was Isabella Reeves, international property investor, with $2 million in verified assets and a reputation that had been carefully constructed over 3 years. The Armani suit I wore cost more than I used to spend on groceries in 6 months. The Cartier watch on my wrist contained a GPS tracker and encrypted communication device. Even my luggage told a story of wealth and sophistication that would open doors Crystal's organization thought they controlled. Michael Torres met me at the airport, but he looked nothing like the casual tech consultant who had visited my basement office. In Dubai, he was Dr. Michael Ashworth, cybersecurity specialist for high-net-worth individuals, complete with British accent and credentials from Oxford. "Welcome to Dubai, Ms. Reeves," he said, kissing my cheek with the familiarity of an old business associate. "I trust your flight was comfortable?" "Excellent, thank you. I'm eager to see the properties you've identified." As we drove through the city's gleaming streets, Michael briefed me on the operation. Crystal's Dubai office is in the Burj Khalifa, 27th floor, operating under the name Gulf Property Solutions. They've been using it to launder money from their American operations and to recruit local women into their overseas trafficking network. Trafficking? Not just financial destruction anymore. They're selling women into actual slavery, using the same isolation and dependency tactics they perfected in Chicago. His voice was grim. The women who get sent to Dubai don't just lose their identities, they lose their freedom entirely. The scope of their evil continued to expand beyond anything I had imagined. But my shock transformed quickly into cold determination. Every revelation made me more dangerous, more focused on complete destruction of their network. How many victims currently? In Dubai? At least 30 women from various countries, all trapped in the same cycle. Isolated, dependent, with no legal recourse. Michael's jaw tightened. One of them is Jennifer Martinez's younger sister. She was recruited 6 months ago for an international marketing opportunity. The Burj Khalifa dominated the skyline like a silver needle piercing the clouds. As we approached the building, I felt something shift inside me, a predatory calm that reminded me more of hunting than of fear. Isabella Reeves has an appointment with Gulf Property Solutions tomorrow at 2 p.m., Michael continued. She's interested in acquiring their entire property portfolio for cash. Their entire portfolio? 47 properties across 3 countries? Worth approximately $28 million. We're going to offer them $30 million in cash, payable within 72 hours. The audacity was breathtaking. We were going to buy their entire criminal empire out from under them, using money they had stolen from their victims. And when they realize Isabella Reeves is actually Naomi Chen, Michael's smile was sharp as a blade. By then, we'll own everything. They've spent 8 years building. Their properties, their shell companies, their offshore accounts, all of it will belong to the women they tried to destroy. What about Crystal and Rudy? They're flying in tomorrow night for the closing. They think they're about to score the biggest payday of their criminal careers. His eyes glittered with anticipation. They have no idea they're walking into a trap. As our car pulled up to the hotel where Isabella Reeves would be staying, the Palazzo Versace, where royalty and billionaires conducted their most sensitive business, I felt the final pieces of my transformation lock into place. The broken woman who had been abandoned at a bank with foreclosure papers was gone forever. In her place stood someone infinitely more dangerous. A predator who had learned to hunt by being hunted, who understood her prey's weaknesses because she had once shared them, and who possessed the resources and ruthlessness to destroy everything they had built. Tomorrow, Crystal and Rudy would discover what happened when victims refused to stay victims. Tomorrow, the hunt would end. The call came at exactly 9 a.m. Dubai time, just as I was finishing my breakfast on the 42nd floor of the Palazzo Versace. Crystal's voice crackled through the international connection, bright with excitement and completely oblivious to the trap closing around her. Naomi, how are you settling in? Are the accommodations acceptable? I gazed out at the Persian Gulf, where luxury yachts dotted the turquoise water like scattered diamonds. Everything is beautiful, Crystal. Almost overwhelming, actually. I can imagine. It must be such a change from Chicago. But don't worry, Mr. Erickson and his team will take good care of you. Mr. Erickson, the silver-haired man who had recruited me, whose real name was actually Viktor Petrov, a former Russian intelligence officer turned money launderer. Michael's surveillance had revealed everything about Crystal's Dubai operation, including the fact that she was no longer the apex predator in this particular food chain. Crystal, I have to ask, are you certain about this opportunity? Some of the contracts they've shown me seem almost too generous. Oh, sweetheart, that's just because you're not used to international business. These overseas investors operate on a completely different scale than anything you experienced in America. Her condescending tone made my skin crawl. Just trust the process and follow their instructions exactly. You're going to do wonderfully. Actually, there's been a development I should mention. I've met another investor here, a woman named Isabella Reeves who's also looking at Middle Eastern properties. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Another investor? She's quite impressive, actually. American businesswoman with substantial assets, looking to acquire a large portfolio of international properties. I let concern creep into my voice. Crystal, she's offering to buy the same properties Nordic Consortium is evaluating, except she's offering cash, and she's offering more. How much more? $30 million for their entire Dubai portfolio. Cash payment within 72 hours. Crystal's sharp intake of breath was audible across continents. $30 million? That's impossible. Who is this woman? Isabella Reeves. I could arrange an introduction, but she's quite busy. She's only available for one meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. before she flies back to London. Tomorrow? Crystal's voice was tight with barely controlled greed. Naomi, this could be incredibly important. If this Isabella woman is legitimate, she seems very legitimate. Flew in on a private jet, staying in the presidential suite, has lawyers and accountants traveling with her. I paused for effect. Should I mention that you and Rudy might be interested in partnering with her? Yes. Absolutely yes. In fact, Rudy and I were already planning to fly out to Dubai tomorrow evening to finalize your contracts. We could meet with this Isabella. Woman first. Perfect. They were taking the bait exactly as Eva had predicted. I'm not sure I can arrange that, Crystal. She's very exclusive about her business meetings. Naomi, listen to me carefully. This meeting could change everything for all of us. Tell Isabella Reeves that the principals of Nordic Consortium, that's us, would be honored to discuss a potential partnership. Whatever she's offering for those properties, we can match it. I'll try, but Crystal, I should warn you. She asks very pointed questions about business practices and legal compliance. She seems to do extensive background checks on potential partners. That's fine. Our business practices are completely above board. The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that I almost admired the performance. But then I thought about Eva Martinez, hiding for 3 years. About Jennifer Martinez's sister, trapped in slavery in this very city. About Pearl, whose name was still on their targeting list. I'll see what I can do, I said finally. But Crystal, if this falls through, please don't blame me. I'm still learning how to navigate these high-level business negotiations. Don't worry, sweetheart. You're doing perfectly. Just arrange that meeting and let us handle the rest. After hanging up, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and stared down at the city where Crystal thought she was sending me to die. In 18 hours, she and Rudy would be sitting across from Isabella Reeves in the same conference room where they planned to finalize my elimination. They would be expecting to meet a naive woman grateful for their generosity, ready to sign documents that would erase her existence forever. Instead, they would come face to face with the architect of their destruction. My secure phone buzzed with a message from Eva. All assets in position. Legal teams standing by. When you give the signal tomorrow, we move simultaneously in Chicago, Miami, and Dubai. No escape routes, no mercy. I typed back. Signal will be when I say the words, "Thank you for everything you've taught me." After that, show no mercy. The sun was setting over Dubai, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow, Crystal and Rudy's empire would burn just as beautifully, and I would watch every moment of it. At exactly 2 p.m., I sat in the marble and gold conference room on the 27th floor of the Burj Khalifa, watching Dubai's skyline stretch endlessly toward the horizon. I was no longer Naomi Chen, the abandoned wife in a foreclosure nightmare. Today, I was Isabella Reeves, international property magnate, wearing a custom Hermes suit that cost more than my old monthly grocery budget, and radiating the quiet confidence that only comes with genuine power. The elevator chimed, and my breath caught as familiar voices echoed down the hallway. After months of preparation, the moment of truth had arrived. Crystal entered first, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor, followed by Rudy in his best suit, the one I'd helped him choose for our anniversary 3 years ago. They both looked polished, confident, ready to close the deal of their criminal careers. Neither recognized me immediately. Ms. Reeves, Crystal extended a manicured hand with her most professional smile. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. I'm Crystal Morrison, and this is my business partner, Rudy Chen. I stood slowly, letting recognition dawn gradually across their faces. Crystal's hand froze mid-air. Rudy's confident expression melted into confusion, then shock, then something approaching terror. Hello, Crystal. Hello, Rudy. My voice was calm, controlled, carrying none of the trembling desperation they remembered. Please sit down. We have a great deal to discuss. Crystal's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. This is impossible. You're supposed to be dead? Eliminated? Disappeared without a trace? I settled back into my chair with the fluid grace of someone completely in control. I'm sure that was the plan. Just like Eva Martinez, just like Jennifer Martinez, just like the 37 other women whose files I found in your basement. Rudy found his voice first, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. Naomi, what are you doing here? How are you here? I think the more interesting question is what you're doing here, Rudy. Although I suppose money laundering and human trafficking require international coordination these days. Crystal's shock was transforming into fury. You little bitch! Do you have any idea what you've stumbled into? This isn't some divorce drama. This is a business worth millions. 47 properties across 3 countries to be exact. 28 million in current assets, not counting the offshore accounts. I slid a thick portfolio across the table. I've made a comprehensive offer for your entire operation. Rudy opened the folder with shaking hands. $30 million. Cash payment in 72 hours. He looked up at me with growing horror. Where did you get $30 million? From your victims. Every dollar you stole, every property you seized, every account you thought you'd hidden. I leaned forward slightly. You see, while you were teaching me about my place in the world, I was learning about yours. And I discovered something fascinating. Your entire empire is built on assets that don't legally belong to you. Crystal was on her feet now, pacing like a caged predator. This is insane. You were nothing. A housewife with no skills, no connections, no power. You can't just transform myself into someone dangerous? I smiled with genuine amusement. But that's exactly what I did. You gave me the greatest gift possible, Crystal. You destroyed the woman I was and forced me to become someone infinitely more capable. What do you want? Rudy's voice was barely audible. Justice. For Eva Martinez, who's been hiding for 3 years because you planned to murder her. For Jennifer, Martinez's sister, who's currently being held in slavery in this very city. For Pearl, whose name I found on your targeting list. I stood, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows. But mostly, I want you to experience exactly what you've inflicted on others. You can't prove anything, Crystal said, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can prove everything. Bank records, recorded conversations, surveillance footage, testimony from dozens of survivors. I turned back to face them. The FBI is executing search warrants in Chicago as we speak. Your Dubai assets are being frozen by international banking authorities, and your shell companies are being dissolved by courts in 3 countries. The silence stretched for 30 seconds before Rudy spoke. What happens to us? That depends on how cooperative you're willing to be with authorities. Full confession, asset forfeiture, and assistance in locating missing victims might earn you life sentences instead of death penalties. Crystal lunged toward me, her mask of sophistication finally slipping completely. You destroyed everything. Years of work, millions of dollars. Thank you for everything you've taught me, I said calmly, triggering the phrase that would signal Eva to begin the final phase. Security guards appeared in the doorway. Not Victor Petrov's men, but Dubai. Police officers accompanied by FBI agents who had been waiting for this moment. As they read Crystal and Rudy their rights, I watched their faces cycle through disbelief, rage, and finally, the crushing realization that they had been completely outmaneuvered by the woman they'd tried to erase. The hunt was over. The predators had become the prey. 5 years later, I stood in the marble lobby of First National Bank, but this time I wasn't clutching foreclosure papers with trembling hands. I was here as the majority shareholder, having acquired the bank through a consortium of Crystal's former victims who had pooled their recovered assets into a powerful investment group. The why? Nervous bank manager who had once delivered my humiliation was now my employee. His hands shook slightly as he handed me the final documents transferring the bank's mortgage portfolio to our ownership. Ms. Chen, This completes the acquisition. You now own every mortgage formerly held by First National, including... He paused, consulting his paperwork. Including several properties previously owned by Mr. Rudy Chen. Excellent. And the former owners of those properties? As per your instructions, all foreclosure proceedings have been reversed. The houses are being returned to their original owners at no cost, with clean titles and paid mortgages. I nodded, watching through the bank's windows as moving trucks arrived at houses throughout the city. Sarah Thompson was getting her home back. The Martinez family was reclaiming their grandmother's house. 12 families total, their lives being restored by the same mechanism that had once destroyed them. There's one more matter, the manager continued hesitantly. The Chen family home on Maple Street. Since you're the rightful owner, we need your instructions for disposition. I had walked through that house the week before, seeing it with eyes that held no nostalgia or pain. The rooms where I'd been systematically isolated and gaslit were just rooms now. The kitchen where I'd cooked countless meals for a man planning my destruction was just a kitchen. Donate it to the Chicago Women's Shelter, I said. Let it become a safe house for women rebuilding their lives. And Mr. Chen's construction business? Being dissolved, the assets will fund legal aid for financial abuse victims. As I walked out of First National Bank for the last time, my phone buzzed with updates from around the world. Eva Martinez had returned to Chicago under her real name, heading a foundation that helped women disappear safely from abusive relationships. Pearl had just opened her third crisis center for victims of financial fraud. Jennifer Martinez was reuniting with the sister we'd rescued from Dubai slavery. Crystal and Rudy were serving life sentences in federal prison, their appeals exhausted, their empire completely dismantled. Every dollar they'd stolen had been recovered and returned to victims. Every property they'd seized was back in rightful hands. But the truest victory wasn't their destruction. It was transformation. Women who had been targeted as victims had become a network of protectors, using the skills learned from surviving monsters to ensure no one else would suffer the same fate. The broken woman who'd been abandoned with foreclosure papers was gone forever. In her place stood someone who had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so powerful that you can save everyone they ever tried to hurt. I smiled as I walked toward my car, toward my real life, toward the future I had built from the ashes of my destruction. The hunt was over. The prey had won, and I was finally, completely free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.